My name is Rosie Goldsmith, and it's really great to be back at Digital Minds. I'm an arts journalist and broadcaster, but I work very closely with the book trade, just to reassure you. I'm delighted to see so many authors here, real-life authors here, which is good news for all of us. And it's great to be chairing an event with two authors as well. Where would we be without them? The idea of this event is to delve deeply and as briskly as we possibly can into all areas of big, bad, or bold and beautiful world of self-publishing, of both author and hybrid publishing. Now, we're a PowerPoint-free zone, preferring the power of the word, the spoken word in this particular case. In this brave new world of print on demand, the fast evolution of ebooks and an explosion of self-published authors, including some very big names, can mean we have to discuss at this very, very early point, I think, what are the hurdles and what are the rewards. And for that purpose, of course, no expense spared, as I say. We have authors. We have Orna Ross, who's over there. I'm going to join them in a minute. Journalist, poet, novelist, also of long experience from Ireland originally. Today, a campaigning self-published author and director of the Alliance of Independent Authors, which she launched 2 years ago here at London Book Fair. We have Hugh Howey, who is at the end there, another author, our second author, who's from the US, former sailor, adventurer, always a book lover though. Today, a much published and very popular sci-fi and fantasy writer with his Silo series, Wool, Dust and Sand, which he independently published through Amazon.com's Kindle Direct Publishing system. So as authors, Hugh and Orna are two leading voices in the self-publishing world, so do listen up. And then we have John Fine, our final panelist, and listening to them and guiding authors through the labyrinths and opportunities of this brave new world, the puppet master himself, director of author and publisher relations for Amazon.com. Now, I'm going to whiz over there as elegantly as I can. And we're going to start our debate. Now, Orna, I'm going to start with you. We'll have a few sort of quality moments together before I unleash you onto the world here. Now, Orna, how and why did you, as a Penguin author, an established author, traditional author, turn to self-publishing?
Well, I started very much as an experiment, actually. I've a sort of a long, I've been a writer forever, and I've always had a day job within the writing world. So I ran a writing school and a literary agency in Dublin when my first novel was, I was going to say picked up by Penguin, but that would be an absolute lie because it was such a struggle to get it in front of an editor, such a struggle to get it published, 50-something queries, 2 agents who didn't manage to do it, on and on and on, and anybody less stubborn than me would have given up long before. So I got the fantastic deal, the literary lottery. I won it, and my first novel was published by Penguin in 2005 with a 2-book contract to follow in 2007. We signed the contract in 2003. That was the first thing that I found kind of difficult, and then there was loads about that was wonderful, of course. It was a wonderful experience in some ways, but in some ways it was a very bruising experience. And I found that publishers were selling not so much to readers as to retailers, and I got caught in that struggle. So I got to #2 best-selling status through Tesco's sales, but the price that was paid creatively for that was very painful. And it didn't work. I didn't think it was going to work. I used to want to go to the marketing meeting and have a little say, but that absolutely wasn't allowed. And I was also, as somebody who ran a writing school, constantly struck by this sort of disjunction between the world of the writer and the world of the publisher. And it was sort of a ne'er the twain will meet kind of thing. And then I was ill and I had to take some time out. And when I came back, self-publishing had arrived. And I said, I'll publish a little pamphlet of poems because nobody reads poetry, so if I make an absolute mess of this, nobody's going to notice. And I loved it. And actually, a couple of people bought this poetry pamphlet, and I was stunned. And so I wondered what would happen if I published my novel. So I went to talk to Penguin, and after a lot of toing and froing of emails, got my rights back and republished my novel with the title I originally envisaged for it, with the cover I originally, and the treatment that I saw, visualized as I was writing it. And I just can't describe to you. It was just the most incredible moment pressing publish on that book, because You know, they turned the book into Lover's Hollow. They had put pink writing on it. I'm the anti-pink. It's just not me. And so, yeah, I've gone on now. And this year, I've kind of set myself a goal of publishing 9 short books in a row, 1 a month. Now, that's something no publisher is ever going to let you do, but I can do it. So that's the reason, really, in short, creative
And what
freedom.
about the creation, before we move on to the other, what about the creation of the Alliance of Independent Authors? Why did you want to create this specifically?
Because it was so amazing, self-publishing, and everybody was talking about, you know, I kind of circulated in the business, and everybody was talking about how terrible it was, and I was actually feeling it to be absolutely wonderful and an incredible opportunity for writers, and I wanted to spread the word, and I also wanted to, you know, I've always been somebody, as I said, who worked within the business. This was the most radical and revolutionary thing that had happened to writers. Like,
But you've only
forever.
been going for two years. What have you feel you've achieved in 2 years?
Well, we've managed to bring writers together. We encourage them in terms of looking at, you know, people were talking earlier on today about self-publishers don't want to edit their own books, and they don't want to have a pile of books on the table that they post out. All of this is absolute misinformation that's constantly put out all the time. So one of our main roles has been education and information, and bringing people together and saying, this is great, and saying, give it a go, you know, try it, experiment, work with it, be part of it. It's really, really radical.
So you do have piles of books on your table, still?
Well, ebooks and print on demand mean you don't have to have piles of books on your table. It's so basic.
My piles of books. Now, Hugh, Howie, you had the most amazing couple of years. I mean, 2011 was a great year for both of you, I think, but both authors seem to have sort of come of age in that particular year. Now, you went directly to self-publishing, really. So tell us what happened, because it is quite a phenomenal story.
Yeah, my first book was with a small publisher. I queried
a real publisher.
Yeah, and you know they paid me money, which I think that's how authors define real publishers. The money comes to us instead of to them, and I had a wonderful experience publishing with them and editing the book with them and collaborating. And I think they were probably going to get frustrated with my constant emails to micromanage stuff, and I wanted things to move faster, and I learned a lot about publishing through being a bookseller and being a critic before I got into writing. So I was seeing all the things we could try, and when I got the contract for the second book and said I might try it on my own, I think they were really relieved. And we still have a great relationship with them and love them to death. But I think they were like, yes, please do it on your own. And yeah, just really enjoyed it. And I see, I'm interested in conduits to readers, and in some cases that's publishers. Some members of my publisher here in the UK are in the audience, and they've helped me get books to readers that I could not have reached otherwise. I just went to Taiwan. My Chinese is horrible. There's no way I would have reached readers there. And last year, it was, you know, one of my books was the #1 work of fiction in Taiwan. That's not something that could happen without their participation. In the US, going the query route and staying with the small publisher would have been a conduit away from readers. It would have limited my ability to reach my audience.
Do you call yourself a self-publisher, or are you a hybrid? I mean, do you do it by yourself, or do you do it with other people?
I call myself a self-publisher who likes to work with publishers when I can. But I think I see in the audience a lot of people self-publishing right now and putting tweets out there and updating their blogs. And I think we think of self-publishing as something that happens with books and then it's awful, and we all spend a lot of time self-publishing. And that means, you know, kids are learning to interact with technology in a new way, and they're constantly writing. There's a study out of Stanford that kids are writing and reading more now than any generation in history. So learning how we can use technology to get our stories out there, to me, is just, it's a fascinating development.
And you've got some amazing ideas, which I've read about, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Now, John Fine from Amazon, Hugh's worked with Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
So what does Amazon.com, what do you do for authors?
Well, I think the way to think about it, and it's fascinating to see how this phrase has changed and taken on new import over time, but when I started with Amazon, I'd come from Knopf about 8 years ago. The sort of tagline was more books, more people, more ways. And really now what I find myself saying is more books for more people, by more people, in more ways. And what I think we've done, and not just Amazon, but the industry, sister companies like Audible and the availability of self-publishing audiobooks, all of this stuff has created a choice, an option, another set of opportunities. When I was at Frankfurt, actually, I think Porter asked me this question: what is self-publishing going to look like in 5-10 years? And I said, I don't think we'll be calling it that anymore. It almost seems like a label that's past its use on some level. The idea is, if you're an author in 10 years, you're going to have an array of options. And it may be a small poetry chat book. It may be a series. It may be that you need help in foreign countries to reach audiences you can't reach in other ways. And whether it's hybrid or self or traditional, I think from an author perspective, it's just an array of opportunities. And I think what we've done is provide both the tools that make it possible for you to take a story and make it available to hundreds of millions of people around the world, and do it simply and easily in a variety of formats, whether it's audio or print or digital. And then, and this is the challenge I think we all, and also, by the way, I think the second prong of that is not only making it possible for people to find these books, but then once they find them, and I think this is to Hugh's point a little bit, I think this study reflects this, the industry, and Amazon I think has led this, has made it so easy for people to read wherever they are. When we started Kindle a few years back, I remember Jeff Bezos saying, you're going to be able to read on your BlackBerry while you're standing in line at the checkout counter, name check BlackBerry there. And I thought to myself, I can't read on my BlackBerry, and I can't imagine Jeff in line at a checkout counter. But if you fast forward, 10 years later, this is what people are doing. And they could be doing other things, right? They could be playing Angry Birds. They could be playing Subway Surf. They're reading. And I think that's the second part. We've made it easy for people to tell stories. And then we've made it really easy for readers to get to those stories, again, in whatever format they want. I think the next challenge that we all face and we're continuing to work towards is, okay, we've created this tsunami of content, which is, many people think, not necessarily great. I actually, as a First Amendment lawyer, a libel lawyer by training, to me, it's a high-class problem to have too many stories. I think at the end of the day, what that means is we have to, as technology companies, as authors, as publishers, as service providers, we need to find ways to help the stories find their right audience. And that, to me, that discoverability problem is the next great challenge that we are tackling every day. Everybody in this room, I imagine, is.
Now, at the risk of making this a platform for Amazon, which of course we're not going to do here at all, we want to talk about all the different platforms.
Yes, please.
But I think we should generally talk about all the different issues. And let's break it down a little bit and find, from Orna, I'm very interested, because you were saying it is such a short time ago that we were thinking, my God, that's absolutely mad to read something on a BlackBerry or and there I'm named
or iPhone,
yeah, iPhone. But when you published your first self-published book, what did you really, in your heart, want it to be taken up by a traditional publisher?
Absolutely not.
Honestly. Did you not think, I just hope now that, now I'm published, everybody will notice me. And so the stigma, the credibility...
No, but I had that, so that wasn't something that I wanted. Though I do know that a number of our members who haven't had that experience do want that experience. And we define an independent author quite simply as somebody who sees themselves as the creative director of their book from concept to publication. And if a trade publisher, as Hugh was saying, is the best way for you to get your book into the hands of, we're not, the Alliance of Independent Authors says that's absolutely fantastic. It's a service, and the idea that they pay you, well, yes, they do, but they don't pay very well. The royalty is very low, and you get some of it as an advance up front. So if that counts as paying you, with Amazon, you pay as you sell. With an assisted publishing service, you may pay up front. So one way or the other, as the author, you're paying somebody. Everybody in this room lives off author-generated income. So it's what we encourage our members to do is to think about that and think about the best way of reaching your reader. And in some cases, it will be a trade publisher. In some cases, it absolutely won't. And for me, at this point in time, it absolutely isn't.
So maybe the phrase is independent writer as opposed to self. As you say, John, we're going to have to find new terms.
Well,
'cause
we
it's changing all the
distinguish
time.
between author-publisher, who's somebody who takes it seriously and is in a career, and perhaps a self-publisher who's self-publishing for family, friends, and a different kind of audience. But the tools that Amazon, Kobo, Ingram, and a number of the bigger players in this market have provided for us are absolutely excellent. They are wonderful tools in terms of reaching readers.
And I think just the point I would make, and I meant to say this earlier, we talk about self-published authors, another distinction that needs to go away, because everybody in this room who is an author, whether it's Knopf or Penguin or Amazon or whomever is publishing your book, once that book hits the market, you are a self-publisher as well, because you need to get out and tell your story and tell your book story. So on some level, and those are the tools that apply to everybody, whether they're published on our site or published by Knopf.
Hugh, you're a writer, but you're also, through this new platform, if you like, you're also an entrepreneur. Do you feel that, I mean, that's obviously something you've embraced, but do you still feel you're the writer?
Yeah, first and foremost, I'm a reader, and I consider myself a reader before I don't even really think of myself as an author. I think I'm someone who dabbles at writing in the morning, but I can't wait to get to the book that I'm reading in the afternoon. I'm missing tube stops with the book I'm reading now. And
sorry about that.
So that's how I define myself. I think all of these things are coming together. I think you can't be a traditionally published author and say, like, I have friends, I just want to be traditionally published so I don't have to do any work. Well, you're not going to get published, because when they sit you down, and I've been in these conversations where they make an offer, they're going to say, so what's your platform? How many Twitter followers do you have? What's your plan for using Facebook? And this terrifies people who think that they're not going to have to use those tools. But Mark Twain had to promote himself in order to have a successful career.
Quite long distances to do so.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think all these distinctions are getting blurred. I think if you're self-published, you need to, hire an editor and get great help in polishing your prose. But if you want to query an agent, I think you should do the same thing. I think you should invest in an editor and maybe even get some cover art to throw on your query letter, and treat traditional publishing just as you would self-publishing, because the slush pile is as competitive as the Amazon marketplace.
So it's not amateur. We're not talking about amateur. This is
No,
something you want
no.
to be taken as
I
professional.
think every author who wants to have a career, writing a rough draft and submitting it to an agent is just as bad as writing a rough draft and hitting publish. It's going to kill your career. You can't resubmit these titles. So invest in yourself. However you're going to publish, treat it all the same.
And this is available. I mean, one of the incredible opportunities that exist now for authors who are going on their own is there is great talent that unfortunately has been constrained out of traditional roles, but is available. And we see in the States and in the UK, and now I was just in India at the Delhi World Book Fair, and you see services, I'm not saying they're all good, buyer beware, but these great opportunities to tap editors, cover designers. I mean, we always say, actually I say, now that you have this opportunity to tell a story, you also have this obligation, this responsibility to make it as good as you possibly can. And the wonder of this is those resources are out there and available now, and you couldn't get to them before.
Let's talk us through the tools that are available, obviously through Amazon, for author publishing. I mean, what have you, and it's only been the last few years as well. I mean, let's call it, we thought authors were customers, consumers for you before, but now you're taking authors, you're taking them seriously, you're offering them really important tools for publishing.
There's a range of things depending upon where you start, and some of it is simply taking the act of making your story available and making that easier and easier and easier. And if you were on the platforms 3 or 4 years ago and you compare to what they are now, a lot of that is increasing the efficiency. And there are some things we haven't done yet. I mean, I still get upset when I think about the fact that if you are publishing on KDP and CreateSpace, you actually have to go through 2 different pipes. And what that reflects is,
one's print and one's digital.
And I should say, Kindle Direct is digital ebook, and CreateSpace is print on demand, which is another amazing tool that really helped leverage the idea, and publishers are using it too, obviously. It reduces, if not eliminates, returns and some of the other drags on the economics of publishing, and that has made it possible for many more books to stay in print and available.
You use both, is that correct?
Yeah, I see it as I think there are 3 outlets right now that are just massive for all authors. And we don't talk about audiobooks enough at these conferences. Every conference, it's always print and digital. My wife, who goes through 2 books a week, does it all by audio. And my audio sales, I could live off my audiobook sales. We turned down 6-figure offers for audiobook rights, and my agent thought I was nuts. And now she's marveling at the changes happened in the last 2 or 3 years, and all of her authors are doing gangbusters in their own audiobook sales.
And you self-published your audiobook.
Yeah. It's it all comes back to story. I love the talk this morning about the Ptolemaic versus Copernican revolution, and he put the internet at the center of that universe. I would put the reader at the center of that universe. And how do we feed stories to them? How do we entertain them? Our competition is not through these various formats. Our competition is video games and all the things people could do with their time. We have to make reading as engaging as possible, as affordable, as sexy. We have to do...
And as easy.
As easy as possible. And I don't think publishers get enough credit for the things they do to help that, but I don't think they criticize themselves enough at the ways that they see other books, even their backlist, as competition.
Thank you. John, if you could just continue these tools that you
the platforms that actually enable you to publish, and I'll build off what we were just hearing from Hugh. In fact, today we've launched in the UK, and I won't be just a walking advertisement, but I really think this is an incredibly cool system, ACX, which essentially is a marketplace that enables authors to, and I'm vastly simplifying, but it's a marketplace that enables authors to meet narrators and producers. And the technology has made it possible for people to use very small audio setups in their homes. And you have this incredible growth of opportunity here. And so this is another example, and it's not just audio. And it's very simple. You do a deal with your producer. You can have several producers submit small samples, and then you can judge them on your own. You can get your community of followers to judge them with you, and then you work out a deal with the narrator, and then it's made available on Audible. And this has been very successful in the States in terms of increasing the way these stories are available. In the States, folks at Audible who subscribe to Audible are reading, 15 plus books a year. There are hundreds of new publishers and authors making titles available every week on ACX in the States. And what's cool is today we've opened it here in the UK. What is the URL? For even in the UK as well.
Far too easy.
Excellent.
I got a sneak peek, and I'm just going to be working now with an narrator in Alaska, and we're doing a 50-50 royalty share. So I've absolutely nothing to lose. She loves my book, Blue Mercy. She said she would love to narrate it. She sends me a sample of her doing that. I think, oh, wow, yeah, I like that.
And the quality is very good. For a couple of years, I worked out of our Brilliance Audio, which is our audiobook publishing house, the traditional one, and so I'm very familiar with the technology and the challenges. So I'm amazed at at how this has happened. And you could see, if you think about it in the future, how can we bring authors together, this time with producers and narrators, but later with translators and with other service providers. And I think that is the next set of tools that we need to help people find both the people to help make their work as good as possible, and then, as I say, to find audiences so that this great wealth of content is finding the readership.
It's happening quickly, though, isn't it? Warner, what's your experience as well as an entrepreneur, but also as an author? What are your main concerns?
Hugh, just before I talk about concerns, Hugh spoke about putting the reader at the heart of things, and I think that's absolutely essential. And I think in a way, the way things have gone, that's what's happening, whether we like it or not, that is there, and I certainly like it. But what I'd also like to see is people putting the writer at the heart of things.
I suppose the readers don't always know. It sounds great to put the reader at the centre.
Yes.
What does it actually mean?
What does it actually mean? You actually go through the writer. And I remember when we launched here 2 years ago, Amazon, Tom Kephart arrived in a T-shirt that said, "We love authors." And I had.
It was definitely a new policy on Amazon's part.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's a very, very interesting question for everybody who's involved in trying to be a bridge between writer and reader. What would your business model look like if you said that, if you actually spoke, if you put authors at the heart of your business and your reaching of readers, I think a lot of the businesses that are, here today would look quite different. And I would be very excited to see those changes.
and Hugh can speak to this better. I actually think that one of the great revolutions that's taken place because of the success of independently published authors is traditional arms of publishing are changing, and you see new imprints starting and they're paying royalties. I mean, that's another,
Royalty is a big, big area, of course. I mean, you've done incredibly well out of this particular new model because you don't get the kind of the minimal royalties, you get mega royalties, don't you, through this method?
Yeah, but I think
I mean,
the money is not the...
Money must be...
paying monthly as opposed to paying
Yeah.
annually. That's what I mean when I say the changes that are being wrought.
And you're seeing the changes in just the information coming from publishers. They're having to compete with, Amazon was paying monthly and you have these dashboards that show real-time sales. Penguin Random House just launched their own dashboard that does the same thing. I think all these tectonic forces we're feeling at our feet are these two enormous plates coming together, not growing apart. It's convergence. It's self-published authors have to act more like traditionally published authors, and traditionally published authors have to act more like self-published
But
authors.
they're all, I mean, in your ideal world, they're all together. It's
Absolutely.
Print, everything's happening at the same time, print, ebooks, audio,
And
they're
when
all
you talk
good.
about being an entrepreneur, working with both, the way I see it, when I'm working with a traditional publisher, it's like clocking it at a business, and it has all those safety nets, but also those restrictions. Being an entrepreneur means 120-hour weeks, but they're all your hours, and all of the fruits of that labor are yours. So do you want to be a small business owner, or do you want to work for a corporation? There are advantages with both, and I enjoy both.
Are you saying that the big five or the traditional publishers don't like authors anymore?
No, I'm not saying they don't like authors. I just think we're their employees. And when you're self-publishing, we're running a small business, and there's more risk, but there's the potential for a lot more reward.
Well, let's talk about quality, because one of the big concerns is, how good are these books? Personally, I have a thing against shiny books. So many of the self-published books seem to be very shiny covers.
They have matte covers now. With
Yes, they are available.
If you come by my booth at FDF, and we'll show you all of our Create Space books.
It's actually nice to be. I've never been at this conference and had a book before, so it'd be actually really nice to take one away after 4 years. But it is interesting. Quality, editorial quality as well, not just visual, editorial quality. How do you guarantee quality?
Well, you don't guarantee because you've got freedom. And I think this is one of the things that's very difficult for trade publishing to get its head around. You don't like shiny covers, and most people in trade publishing hate shiny covers, but probably a lot of readers don't even notice that. These are kinds of questions that are very trade-based. The self-publishing happens within an abundance model. Look, reading and writing now happens within an abundance model. There ain't no control. It's gone. It's over in that sense. There's no way of guaranteeing anything, and it doesn't really matter because in a creative environment, waste and excess and redundancy are all just part of what happens. We have very, very efficient tools now. The rubbish, the crap books, as one publishing executive called them to me the other day, they will fall to the bottom because they won't actually succeed. The reader won't carry on reading them. They're not really of concern. Trade publishing puts a lot of emphasis on that because of its traditional curation role. And that role has value, and I'm not denying that, but I am saying that within the context of reading and writing, it's something that happens in one stream, but it isn't the whole thing. And it doesn't really matter. What matters is that we facilitate a lot more great books. And in every sort of renaissance from, Italy in the 14th century to whenever, new formats come along, more people start doing the thing. You get a sort of an iceberg effect where the more bad stuff you have, the more good stuff you have. It's the same in nature. And, an oak tree throws out a lot of acorns to get one oak tree. And that in a creative model, we're moving from a commercial model to a more creative model. And I personally think that's a very good thing. So
for you, it's about creative freedom.
For me, it's about creative freedom. And we can absolutely encourage excellence. We absolutely encourage our members to get an editor and to get good design. And we say there's no such thing as self-publishing. You cannot do it alone.
And just to be clear, there were occasionally bad books in the past before self-publishing.
And there were too many books in the past. When I worked as a bookseller before self-publishing, we lamented the catalogs that came in and how many books publishers were putting out. There was talk in the publishing industry before self-publishing that they needed to winnow the number of books that were coming out. So this is not a new problem, and it's not a self-publishing
And there's an
problem.
environmental issue as well, too, a really big environmental issue. I mean, the amount of paper.
Well, that's the beauty of the technology stuff, right? I mean, the POD and digital in that sense, both in terms of making things available forever, but also in terms of reducing the drain on resources, it's a nice plus.
Now, I mean, just about quality and so on, who are your editors? I mean, who edits the books that are submitted to
For independent publishing, for the self-publishing, there are none. It is the author's responsibility. They have, and so here's the thing, and to the point, I mean, at the end of the day, it's funny, we go through these conferences and we give all kinds of tips on promotion and marketing and all kinds of things you can do, much more author-focused a lot of the time. At the end of the day, if your book sucks, it's not going to succeed, probably. And certainly as an author, you won't continue to succeed. And I do think that there's a recognition here, and I mean, these guys can speak to it more profoundly than I can, on the author's part, hey, I've got this opportunity. I'm going to make it really, really good. If it's my goal. Remember, there are a lot of folks telling stories. My grandmother would tell a story about her escape from Russia, not because she hoped to sell it, but because she hoped my daughter and her daughter would be able to read it later on. And that's another beautiful thing about the technology here, even if you aren't trying to broadcast and publish to a broad audience, the technology can help you in that way.
How many books on Amazon.com are self-published now?
Oh gosh, I don't know the answer to that.
It's close to 2 million, I think.
I know that there
1.5
are
million.
millions and millions of books, 40,000 publishers, over 40,000 publishers. I can't even begin to count the authors, illustrators, translators. A proportion of that is independently published books in the States. If out of the top 100 every week that are sold digitally, usually 30 of that top 100 are self-published.
So about a quarter.
Here in the UK, a little more. Here in the UK, we see about 20 of that top 100 every week. India is also at 20 about now. In Germany, I think we're at something closer to 35 of the top 100 titles digitally published each week digitally sold each week are self-published.
Hugh, did you want to say something? I mean, I'm just thinking, when you get your book published in whichever way, how do you distribute it? Where does it go to? Does it end up in a bookshop?
They have ended up in bookshops. That was the interesting thing about Wool is the demand got so great that Barnes & Noble and our major independent bookstores like Powell's, which have multiple chains and they have an incredible reputation, we're stocking the book and putting it face out and putting staff recommendation labels on the book. So there's no limit to what a print-on-demand book does because reader demand will create that market. But even in the print market, about half of print sales are coming through online retailers. So when we just look at digital and think that's the online sales and print is the offline, that's not true. I mean, probably 60 to 75% of the market is online, whether that's print and digital being sold through online retailers. So I wasn't really worried about bookstore penetration. I worked in a bookstore and I didn't care if my books ended up in that.
Though you decided to go with that print distribution deal in the US, which is an interesting
Why did you decide to do that?
I felt a little beholden to the process. My agent and I started this conversation thinking that it would help publishers move to this for someone else down the road. We didn't think it would be us that was offered this deal first. We thought publishers needed to have someone say no several times before they finally changed what they offered, and it happened within my lifetime. Happened within the year that we spent querying, and so you can't pursue a deal and then when it comes around not take it. But by the time the deal happened, my book was already getting print distribution. So it was a little interesting. We took the deal because we wanted to try to usher in some change in the market. But even when we took it, I didn't think necessarily that this was a blockbuster deal.
And again, that's the kind of impact I think that.
Yeah.
So I think distribution is a very interesting question, and it's the one that a lot of our members are concerned with because a lot of them actually do want to be in bookstores, and I think there's a very natural sort of marriage between indie publishers, indie bookstores, and indie authors, and that's not being facilitated as well as it might be. So little plug, tomorrow we're launching a book called Opening Up to Indie Authors, and it's about how bookstores, prizes, reviewers, media, everybody who acts as a bridge between writer and reader can actually work with indies and also for the self-publishing writer themselves to understand the constraints that bookstores are under, to understand the constraints that indie publishers work with. There are challenges there, but you know, we're seeing them already. Beautiful, really, really nice kind of connections, because we focus a lot when we look at self-publishing at the top 10, the top 100, the top sellers, and that's very natural because I think everybody's still a bit stunned by the success that self-publishing has had. But there are very interesting things going on further down the chain in terms of literary work that's happening, in terms of really bold, experimental sort of work that's happening that wouldn't happen because the publisher couldn't take that sort of risk. And we're really interested in facilitating dialogue between indie publishers, indie bookstores, and indie authors. So if any of you would like to further that dialogue, please do kind of say hi.
We haven't. That's great. We haven't actually looked at. We haven't got time to look at all aspects of this, or even the negative aspects too. And I'm sure. I mean, if you have any, give us them now.
Well, I think actually this has been a challenge for folks who are not at the top of the game. I mean, we had for a long time an offering for print-on-demand folks through CreateSpace in the U.S., where you could pay $25 extra and get your book placed in catalogs like Ingram's. The idea was expanded distribution, but you can't. Listing it in the catalog doesn't get it into the store. And in fact, we now don't charge for that because we felt it is a challenge and the expectations need to be set right. So if you are a print POD book and you want to get it into a bookstore, it is a much more challenging road. It does happen all the time, particularly more and more. You go to your neighborhood store. I know Elliott Bay Books in Seattle does this all the time. You go to your library also, because that's another really important and still burgeoning aspect of self-publishing, and you have to work it.
Indeed. I just want to read out one thing which you may have heard of from our national press just last month. It's a reminder, it's a news item from March 2014. It's a reminder of the world we're actually living in. When the US author George Saunders was awarded the inaugural Folio Prize, A.S. Byatt, our wonderful British author, asked to know why UK publishers had not found anything as exciting as the US Folio entries, warning that the recent trend of latching onto successful self-published titles was dumbing down the industry. And she said, this might be very good for making money, but not for British literature. Discuss. I mean, we could be here all day talking, but you're dealing with a high degree of skepticism.
In a very small part of the population, I think. I think for readers and for authors, it's a wondrous opportunity, and I think you will always, we were actually on a panel in Frankfurt, and we had a really interesting discussion with an agent here who was on the panel with us about storytelling versus, I mean, Hugh, you have some very good comments on this.
This tension has always been in the publishing world. I love reading literary works. I mean, I gravitate toward nonfiction and literary, but I don't force that on other people, and I don't tell people that my reading taste is superior to theirs. But you see that a lot in the publishing world. I saw it in my boss at the bookstore. He was a dear friend. I love him to death, but he put the books that he wished people would read front and center, and I put the books that I thought people wanted to read front and center, and I sold a lot more of my books than he did his. He had an agenda of wishing he had company in his tastes, in what he loved. It's like someone who loves opera wishing no one went to the cinema and they just went to opera. You're not going to get far like that. I think if someone loves literature, then they should be a patron to a writer they love, like we did in the past when we had patrons for artists. Pay their salary and support their work and let them
Brilliant idea.
write work. But don't expect the public to support your taste. That's egocentrism at its worst. And I've always stuck up for, as a bookseller.
Authors aren't egocentric.
Well, I don't think they should be. I mean, I don't know how you are. I mean, most writers I know hate their own stuff, so you just learn not to think very highly of yourself. I've always supported the Pattersons and the Rawlings and the people, Stephanie Meyer, 50 Shades of Grey. These are getting people in bookstores, buying books, looking down on them because they're not writing high literature. That's craziness. If you love those books, support a writer and help them turn out more of them. Just don't expect anyone to buy them or read them, except perhaps me.
Now, we did start 15 minutes late, so I'm just going to do a quick fire last round with all of you, if that's okay. And I just wanted to bring up one thing which I think is, I think for me this has been an eye-opener, sort of reading about self-publishing and learning about it too. I love the old world too, but one of the things I think is absolutely fantastic that Amazon's doing is Amazon Crossing. I work a lot with international translated and foreign books, and I think that a number of authors I've spoken to internationally say this is a really great idea, and I know that other platforms are taking it up. But just tell us briefly about that, and then I'd like each of you to have a kind of look ahead quickly to your big favourite mission mantra for the future. Okay.
Just quickly,
yeah.
It's actually the whole idea of this white space. We saw it as a business opportunity, this failure. So many English language books, I'll throw out numbers that may or may not be true now. 50% of books published in English language get translated into some language. 3%, and who knows whether that's right anymore.
Could be 4.5.
Yeah, exactly, but still a marked decrease, get translated from other languages into English. And that's a huge load of stories that aren't being shared. And so Crossing, the idea was, we saw, traditional publishers, I think, rightfully, there's a challenge there, marketing, translation costs, et cetera. And we saw that, we always see that as sort of, okay, there's a white space. That's a business opportunity. And so we were very focused on that aspect, bringing more works into the English language. And actually, I think last year, by the measurement of the 3% blog, which is the sort of place everybody goes to read about this stuff, we were either 1 or 2 in terms of number of books published in translation in the US. We've now broadened it because, frankly, we're a global company, and the idea is every book should be in every language. That's aspirational, certainly from this viewpoint right now. But at the end of the day, that ties right back to what I started with, which is more books for more people in more ways, and by more people. And more ways means language, it means audio, it means Braille. It means every kind of different way you can make it available. And my one mantra, and it was another self-published author who said this at BEA 5 years ago. It was the first sort of BEA panel on self-publishing. At the end, we had a great crowd. And at the end, I asked him what would he recommend to these folks if they want to be sitting here next year on the rostrum. And he said, don't write shit. And that actually is a terrific and valuable piece of advice.
On those poetic words, Orna, what's your mantra for your...
Well, for me, the big mission is it's about democratizing publishing. And for me, I come from a creative background, creative facilitation, so teaching creative writing has been very important, and it has always come to this kind of full stop where you've written the book, you've done the thing, and you can't get it out there. So this to me was like a big opening. And for me, what I want to do, if all goes well and we get enough members, I want to have a foundation where we bring self-publishing to communities who normally, traditionally have not had a voice, who traditionally don't use the written word, and show them how they can actually speak and get their words out all over the world.
Awesome.
And Hugh Howey.
I think the reason the future confuses us is because we don't look far enough back in the past. I think we look at recent history and pretend that it's ancient history. So we look at the novel and assume that that's how words have always been delivered, and it's not true. The reason we're in this industry, I think, the reason we're all readers, the reason the book industry has a very long and bright future is because at the heart of who we are as humans, we're storytellers. And until we start remembering that root cause, we're going to confuse our industry as delivering books or delivering audio. We're delivering stories. And that means getting readers involved in that process as well. In celebrating fan fiction or celebrating social media, it's all about us around a campfire. Our first books were oral traditions, and they changed. They were works of fan fiction.
And then serials, which are coming back.
Absolutely. So don't get hung up on any one thing. The industry is going to keep changing. But let's remember the root of it and who we are as human beings, and that'll inform our industry, which is to deliver stories to the people who want to hear them.
I like the sound of that. Thank you so much, Hugh Howey, Orna Ross, and John Fine. Thank you very, very much indeed. And do join us outside for lunch. There'll be, I'm sure, lots more stories to tell. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great.